Good morning, it's the homie Joshua, and today I want to talk about this idea of police reform versus police redesigning, right? And so there are some people who believe that there are good cops and bad cops, and it's the bad apples that kind of ruin the whole bunch. Therefore, we just need to make some reforms and everything will be fine. There's other people that believe that the institution of policing in the United States is flawed to its core and therefore needs to be redesigned in a way in which the community is actually protected and served. And for most people that believe that, it would require taking away some of the roles that police currently have and handing those over to more qualified individuals and folks that are more invested in the community than a traditional officer. So I tend to lean on the side of redesign rather than reform, and I actually found an article from a couple days ago that gives a great explanation as to this whole bad apples corrupting the larger good core, right? I actually think that it's the opposite. And so forgive me because I'm gonna read for a second and then we'll talk about it on the back end. So I got this article from KTVU, Bay Area's main news station for the most part. It also quotes the Sacramento Bee, and it is entitled California Prison Guard Dies by His Own Hand. I gotta be careful of the language because of YouTube. After reporting officers' fake documents and planted drugs. A California prison guard died at his own hand after reporting corruption and harassment to authorities and cooperating with attorneys suing the state, a newspaper reported Wednesday. Sergeant Kevin Steele, age 56, wrote memos to top prison officials earlier this year in which he said fellow correctional officers in his California State Prison in Sacramento investigations unit faked documents and planted drugs and weapons on inmates. Two lawyers told the Sacramento Bee that Steele had also been working with them on cases where he alleged evidence had been falsified or covered up. He was found dead August 20th in Miller County, Missouri, where he had gone after being barred from prison grounds during what prison officials say was a misconduct investigation. The county coroner has ruled his death as a result of his own hand. Excuse me. A second member of the same investigations unit, who also complained of harassment and retaliation, 30-year-old Valentino Rodriguez, died of an accidental fentanyl overdose at his home in West Sacramento a year ago. The entire unit, tasked with investigating crimes committed inside the prison, so the ISU, has been replaced and 10 of its officers are facing discipline relating to Rodriguez's death, Corrections Department spokeswoman Dana Simas told the newspaper. Prison employees are facing investigations by both the FBI and the Corrections Department. We do take every allegation of misconduct by staff very seriously and work hard to ensure there is accountability when allegations are sustained, Seema said in an email to the Bee. John Balaz, an attorney for white supremacist prison gang member facing federal charges, said Steele was his confidential source for statements in court documents he filed alleging his client may be killed in the maximum security prison commonly known as New Folsom. The source he now identifies as Steele advised that, quote, rogue guards planted weapons and drugs in inmate cells to obtain more overtime, spread false rumors, and relayed private information from inmates' files to other inmates in violation of department policy, and, quoting, on at least 2 occasions have been directly involved in the killing of a CSP Sacramento inmate, Ball said in his court filing. He alleged that guards allowed inmates to conduct a quote-unquote practice run a week before 2 inmates killed a fellow prisoner who was handcuffed to a chair, citing a source he now says was Steele. In January, a memo to prison warden Jeffrey Lynch obtained by the Bee, Steele said he alerted his supervisors to inconsistencies regarding that slaying, backed up with recorded interviews. The newspaper earlier reported that prosecutors said the confidential source was interviewed by the FBI and did not have direct knowledge of wrongdoing, but was relying on a report and other evidence, including a video. Steele alleged in a February memo to Corrections Secretary Kathleen Allison that prison officials had responded with indifference to his reports of wrongdoing and to the victimization of Rodriguez, who's the one who passed of an overdose. I am not a disgruntled employee seeking vengeance, Steele wrote to Allison. Instead, I was a witness to an ISU unit which became engulfed in corruption and watched as integrity was forced to cower in the face of terror and in fear of retaliation. Ball says Steele also told him that allegations are false that his client, Aryan Brotherhood member Brant Daniel, planned to kill a correctional officer with a homemade knife that was found in his cell. A second lawyer, Steve Glickman, told the Bee that Steele informed him that evidence had been suppressed in the death of a 29-year-old inmate found dead in his cell. Corrections officials said he hanged himself alone in his cell in 2016, leaving behind a suicide note, and Glickman filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of the inmate's family. But Steele said another inmate had confessed on video and in writing to the slaying, but that confessions had disappeared. Glickman said Steele immediately informed the prison warden and had been set to testify publicly when he died. This is a quote: "At every single juncture where I discovered something that resembled corruption, wrongdoing, exploitation, fraudulency, and or breaches of trust, I always alerted supervisory staff and institutional leadership, as that is what I thought was the desire of both the administrative staff and the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation," end quote, Steele said in his January memo to the prison's warden. However, it would appear that it's not the desire of either entity, is what Steele said. He said in the memo that Rodriguez told him some of their fellow officers were planting drugs and weapons on inmates late in the afternoons, quote, in an effort to work overtime hours to finish the reports. Wow. A year ago, federal prosecutors charged 2 former correctional officers with faking reports in the death of a 65-year-old New Folsom inmate. Ashley Marie Arich pleaded guilty in January to lying in her accounts of how another correctional officer yanked the legs from under the handcuffed inmate in 2016. 2 guards were escorting the prisoner, who struck his head on the concrete and died at a hospital 2 days later. Both were dismissed from their jobs in 2018. The second former officer, Arturo Pacheco, faces 2 federal charges of deprivation under rights of color of law and 2 counts of falsification of records in a federal investigation. So that's the end of the article, right? And it's dated three days ago. So that would have been October 7th, I believe, right? So nonetheless, that's a lot to digest. For those who have been incarcerated, in particular in California, none of this will come as a surprise. I can recall being in Solano and bullets came up missing from the guns in the control towers, which nobody has any access to, obviously, except for employees. And bullets would come up missing, necessitating a long 2-week lockdown and a sweep. And they would find the bullets over the fence in an out of bounds area where incarcerated people can't access, right? So basically, SEALs would take a bullet out the gun on their way to get off the yard, toss it over the fence where it couldn't be used against them in any way, and we'd be on lockdown and they'd get hazard pay, right? Things like that happen frequently. Guards back then spoke out against that stuff and they would disappear. They were routinely disciplined. And there's several reports from around the country, from law enforcement on the streets, from sheriff's departments, from the feds themselves, to correctional staff and onward. They don't respect snitching on their own, right? The LA County Sheriff's Department has multiple gangs operating within its unit, and they terrorize people that work for them who do not go along with that agenda. That rised all the way to the top with Lee Baca, who wound up getting in trouble. And some people would say, well, the fact that some of these folks get removed from their jobs, or the fact that, for example, this one person is facing federal charges, therefore, the system is working, right? Because the bad cops, quote unquote, are being found out. The good cops are dead, right? If we want to look at the good, bad cop scenario, right? The COs that are blowing the whistle are gone. I'm assuming they have families. Anytime we hear of a law enforcement officer who passes away through a traffic accident or through an encounter with a civilian, there's a huge hoopla, right? On the freeway, you got fire trucks, you got banners, they shut down roads, it's breaking news, it's covered 24/7. We know about their families and how long they were on the department and what they like to eat for lunch and where they went to worship and, you know, what their 2nd grade teacher thinks of them as a hero, right? That sacrificed everything for the safety of the public. We don't hear anything about these guys, right? We don't hear anything about the guy who ran out of prison and went to Missouri and decided he'd rather leave this life than deal with the consequences, probably internally, and also the fear of those who were set against him for siding with the inmates, so to speak. We don't hear about the person who suddenly has a accidental fentanyl overdose, inside their home after being harassed for exposing wrong officers, right? Correctional officers doing wrong. There's no parade for them, right? There's no celebration for them. And it's because they're not wanted, right? COs operate, and law enforcement has come to operate in this country very similar to the way that they project the hood operates, right? They literally spray paint graffiti on walls and get tattoos and have insignias and have, processes for recruitment and whatnot. That's all the stuff they say about us, right? That's all the stuff they say about the hood. And they expect you to be loyal to them. They expect you to be loyal to the cause, right? So this is not about, well, we need to reform the system and empower the good officers. Good officers, quote unquote, tend to not stay officers. People that become police officers because they desire to protect and serve the community, and because they desire to change the narrative and the representation of law enforcement in their communities, and they figure, hey, I'm going to be one of the good ones, right? Because I don't view things this way. They get ran out. They get shut down. They get harassed and demeaned and threatened and sometimes harmed. They get driven to the point of harming themselves, or they leave the department. Either that or they become corrupted by the culture. We talk about power corrupting. This is an example, right? These folks have power. They are the authorities. And so if you don't subscribe to their agenda, there's really no place for you. And that is as true within some organizations that operate within prison as it is with COs that operate within prison and law enforcement that operates in society. So this is just another example of why I tend to reject that argument. Not because I believe that every person wearing a uniform or every person having a badge is just this inherently disgusting person. I don't think every single one of them lack character and lack morals. I think a lot of them do. I think the majority of them do. And whether it's by committing offenses towards people, or whether it's turning a blind eye to those offenses when they're done, either way, it's wrong. And these are folks that are paid by tax dollars, that work for the government, that is normally the highest form of government that your average civilian is ever going to encounter, right? We're not likely to encounter the military. We're not likely to encounter even elected representatives, right? We're most likely to encounter a cop. And this is the type of behavior that is normalized within policing. The us versus them has grown so toxic, and I think originated in toxicity. It originated with this concept of disposable populations. It originated with this idea of demeaning certain people, in particular unworking people or underemployed people or people of color or people of low economic status or people of low education or people with mental health challenges, right? People who live life a little bit differently than your quote unquote average person. The police are designed to subdue that, right? I won't get into the whole origins of policing now. It is something that I have studied in depth. It is something that I studied at UC Berkeley with some renowned professors that are just flat out geniuses on this topic. And the idea was, yes, there's roots to the slave catcher system, although there's some differences, obviously. But it's also a matter of capital. It's a matter of money, right? If you're a wanderer, if you're not making money, then you're a drain on the system. So the system is going to make money off of you somehow. And if you're not working and paying taxes to support them, they're going to incarcerate you and then require government money to house you and provide the bare basics, if that, for you, because you're a drain on the system, right? And so they're going to find a way. So anyways, policing as an institution in this country is flawed, right? And some of that is based on the expectations of society and based on the expectations of elected leaders and based on the political pandering of certain individuals, right? And based on the power of correctional officers unions and police departments unions, who are some of the most powerful unions in the country and are basically just political agents, right? That's all they are. And so they negotiate for increased use of policing because that obviously increases their budget. And when they increase policing staff and they increase policing budget, that also increases the money that these people in suits get for advocating for police, right? So it's a big circle jerk. They serve themselves. And so now you have police responding to mental health crises, but they're not trained in mental health crises. They go through this post-training. It's a few weeks, essentially. They're not mental health experts. Most police officers don't have a college education. And so you're asking them to do jobs without giving them the tools to do it, except for a gun and a baton and some handcuffs, right? So of course, as I've said before, if if all you have is a hammer, then the whole world is a nail, right? If all you have is a gun and handcuffs and this insane authority that this badge gives you to basically order anybody to do anything at any time and demand compliance, otherwise get arrested, then that's what's going to happen, right? This is not a surprise. And those who try to change that from the inside are met with incredible resistance. And this is just one example of what the result can be of that. Now, I don't know. I don't have the magic answer for what policing should look like in this country in terms of all the details, right? I don't think really anybody does. It's a conversation, right? This whole abolish the police is a conversation. It's trying to get us out of thinking of things through this lens that we're so traditional in of, hey, this is how things are, so this is how things need to be. And we got a little bit of room to the left or the right or the front or the back to make some adjustments. And then we're going to drive straight instead of, hey, look, man, this whole road is tore up, right? So we need another path, right? And maybe some stuff about this path will be helpful on the new path, but we need to fundamentally build. We need to start from the ground up and build a new path. And we have tons of data, and we have tons of information, and we have tons of community feedback, and we have tons of research, and we have hundreds of years of history to show us what doesn't work. And then we have a global perspective to show us what does work. Because the United States is the only place that has a police department the way that we do. We're the only people that do policing the way that we do. Yes, there are governments that are more oppressive, right? In Russia, if you write an article they don't like, they could be off with your head. But they don't pretend to be what the United States pretends to be. They're an iron-fisted country, and they will tell you we're an iron-fisted country. And they rule by fear and power and might. They don't hide from that, right? The United States hides from that. And the police are to protect and serve, and everybody is equal, and everybody got a fair shake, and we're a representative democracy, and everybody's voice is heard, and look at this beautiful constitution we have, and this history, and people from all over the world want to come here because we got it the best, and we're the best country at everything. And 99.9% of that stuff is nonsense, right? It's just not true. And so we have a global view of how other places work things, right? And people, in general, people are people, right? There's not a radical difference between people in this country and people in other countries, right? In terms of like behavior-wise. People are people. It's the culture that people are in that causes these big swings of what's normal and what's not normal. So what is normal in the United States is not normal in other parts of the world. The people there are normal, and we are normal, but the culture we come up in shapes what's acceptable and what's not, right? And normal is a range, obviously, you know? But people are people. We walk, we talk, we eat, we use the bathroom, right? We put our socks on one at a time if we have socks. If we don't, we rock barefooted. Like, we make it work, right? So there's information out there that will help us as a country look at what we can do different. And is it going to upset some people politically? Absolutely. And is it going to upset the pocketbooks of organizations and policing organizations? Absolutely. But how does that hurt us, right? At the end of the day, we have a lot of violence and a lot of trauma happening in our community. Policing doesn't fix that, right? Even if you want to look at it through a very conservative point of view in terms of prison organizations and their operations, every one of them been indicted time and time again, and they all still exist, right? The big ones, they ain't going nowhere. They're still here. They look different. They restructure, right? They have some reforms, but they won't be stopped by law enforcement. You know, how many of us come from neighborhoods where there's unsolved homicides? And I'm not out there rooting for people to get arrested, but I'm just saying, if police was the answer, why does that happen? If police are the answer, why do we have so much theft and carjacking and everything else? If police are the answer, why is there so much rampant substance abuse, right? There's other factors at play, and we cannot put that on them to do. They're incapable of doing it, and they've been so empowered in this country and so idolized by enough people in this country that you can't shift them from the inside, right? It just doesn't work. Maybe on a really small level, one town with a population of 5,000-6,000 people, policing in that town may change. Policing in that county's court system is wishy-washy, right? So anyways, that's my spiel. I lean in the direction of police redesign, and redesigning policing and engaging with community policing and addressing the other factors that lead to crime, as opposed to just making some little tweaks here and there to the current model of policing and expecting that all of a sudden people are going to be safe, and expecting that all of a sudden these good apples, so to speak, are going to be able to flourish and root out the bad ones. No, it's inverted. It's upside down. Good apples get corrupted by bad ones. And if you think about it, that happens a lot easier. If you get a basket of fruit and it's all very good fruit, and you just put some bad fruit in there, is that very good fruit going to make that bad fruit good? No. Once stuff starts breaking down, it's a wrap, right? You put bad fruit in a bowl of good fruit, and if that good fruit doesn't do anything, if you don't remove the good fruit and put it someplace else, or you don't remove the bad fruit to eliminate the threat, all that good fruit, if it left untouched, is going to go bad much faster, right? And that is what has happened to policing in the United States. Listen, this is the Homie Hangout, where we cover a bunch of subjects. Homie standing for helping others move in excellence. I hope you do that for yourself today, and I hope you do that for other people, and I'll catch you on the next one. Like, subscribe, I got playlists, I got it all. There's something for everybody here, man. It's not all just prison stories. This is not your average prison channel. Homie Hangout. Have a blessed day.